Magic. So at some point, something's going to resolve and take over. But in these pre-board games, in those post-board games where there's a ton of counter magic, Castle Ardenvale matters a lot.
Oh yeah, being able to get down that land that makes 1/1s, so you can attack your opponent's planeswalkers or potentially their life total. And we see that Rest in Peace in the opening hand for Nassif there. So we might see some early on graveyard hate. There are lots of ways to interact with that Rest in Peace, though, in these decks. For the most part, it's just putting it back into deck.
Yeah, which, you're fine with running. The main problem with it is if you run into memory lapse, is you're not maybe going to make a land drop. So that's kind of the consideration. There is only one Dovin's Veto in the deck from Marcio Carvalho, and doesn't fire it off, just going, you know what, this Rest in Peace does cost a card. So that is one part. It costs a card, and then eventually it does something. But for now, it doesn't do anything. It just sits in play, and Nassif's down a card.
Now Nassif has these two Narsets in hand. A very nice way to play against other decks in blue. Of course, if it takes 3 damage after -2ing, it will be gone. But there's a backup. I do like playing Narset here, though. Narset's passive ability, being an all-star in so many different matchups, stopping your opponent from drawing cards when card advantage is king and so freely available from cards like Teferi, you always want to stop it.
Yeah, and that's why Lightning Helix matters, right? Is being able to deal with Narset, so the passive is in there. And Narset being important in this matchup means we see a Dovin's Veto. Something to highlight, this was a good turn to tap out because your opponent, the thing you don't want to see happen is your opponent playing Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Last turn, that wasn't going to happen. This turn, it can. That said, if Teferi comes and kind of minus freeze on Narset, well, you can play your own maybe and start getting ahead. That said, your opponent might be left with a Teferi, and that's a really dangerous spot. So I'd be surprised to see Nassif going for Narset in this spot, but it isn't impossible.
There's enough mana but there's not enough mana for Narset and, say, Memory Lapse. We do see, though, the potential of a Magma Opus into Torrential Gearhulk in the next 2 turns for Carvalho, which is something I would love to see. Gearhulk is just such an all-star card. It's this huge flash beater. It's hard to deal with, and it comes with a free recast of an instant.
Yeah, and that's why that Rest in Peace is important. Like, it does cost Nassif a card, but it stops that. Now,
yes,
Magma Opus...
there would need to be something to deal with the Rest in Peace first.
Right, which, you could Teferi minus, but honestly, the 5/6 body is fine, and Magma Opus is an 8-mana card. In this matchup, that's very castable.
Ooh, yeah. This is going to be nice and slow.
Yeah, and the counter magic's Memory Lapse. What's going on? It just goes back on top, and you just get to recast this big impact spell. Game 1's really hard for Nassif, just because of all of this.
And we're seeing the consideration for minusing Narset, but going to keep her at full loyalty this time, fearing another Lightning Helix. And Nassif was right to do so. There's a Lightning Helix right there.
Yeah. So one of the things that's kind of interesting in these matchups with the addition of Brainstorm is before, when you had cards like Lightning Helix and other things that had low utility in a matchup, your goal is to burn them because anything you can do to trade those cards for something useful is worth it. But with Brainstorm, that becomes less true because you could any card in your hand has value because you can Brainstorm, put it away, shuffle it. So at that point, that extra card in hand does have value, even though it might be a complete dead card in the matchup. Yeah.
So unfortunately, any card draw still being bricked by Narset, but it's possible to do 2 damage to her with the Prismari command.
Yeah.
And here comes Teferi. We've got a double threat of commanders here, or of planeswalkers here. Hi, Teferi. How you doing? Here to draw a card? Of course you are. Only one player can draw cards, and it shall be Teferi.
Yeah, and the Narset might go down to Prismari command, but the other mode is make a treasure pretty much. So since, not exactly
You don't
going
want
to
to draw
discard.
any cards. Yeah, that would be a very rough discard too.
Yes. I mean, at least it's draw 1, discard 2. But yes, it's still really brutal. Not something you want to experience. And yeah, look at the power of this Rest in Peace. These Torrential Gearhulks, I mean, they're fine. They're 5/6 flash
They're
creatures.
fine. Yeah, they might be able to hit Teferi. Maybe.
I mean, that wasn't a good card in Kaldheim draft, but I mean, it's still fine. Like, you still run it. Technically, it comes into play on tap, but same difference. In this matchup, anything that can make your opponent tap out, but the problem here is that, Nassif essentially gets to draw an extra card per turn, and Marcio doesn't. And that is everything, right? When one player gets to draw an extra card per turn and the other doesn't, it's such a drawback.
So now we're seeing these two Fabled Passages get cracked, getting the blue mana for those Torrential Gearhulks. But we see these memory lapses, and what's kind of mean about memory lapse as a counter spell is not only does it stop a card from resolving, it also time walks your opponent and makes them draw it again.
Yep. So we know Marcio is not going to draw.
Not going to get a land, not going to be able to play the Magma Opus. Only has the option to have this Gearhulk come down.
Yep. And in the meantime, Nassif could draw a Shark Typhoon, just put a single creature in front, or Gideon of the Trials. I mean, that's fine too.
And with another memory lapse in hand, Teferi grows closer and closer to ulting. There is a Castle Ardenvale with enough untapped mana to make a 1/1, but it's just so much better to, try to resolve this Torrential Gearhulk.
I think you're correct. Like, yes, it is a lot of mana to Castle Ardenvale, but then next turn you play Gideon of the Trials and invalidate the threat anyways. So you can keep a memory lapse just in case Marcio has something more powerful like a Teferi Hero of Dominaria or a Magma Opus, right? These cards that are present in the deck. This gives you... At this point, Nassif is really ahead. So it's all about how can I stay ahead and make sure I guarantee the win in this match.
You can't see it, but I am throwing Teferi a Death Glare right here. Like, you're the problem. You're the problem, Teferi. You're an amazing character and a really cool hero in the Magic story, but you're also a pain in the butt.
Teferi?
Do you not love Teferi? Do you not love and hate Teferi?
It was not a card I personally enjoyed playing against. At least now it's kind of in the right power level of format, right? It's like, if you're going to resolve a 5-mana sorcery speed spell in Historic, that to me feels like the right power level for Teferi.
Maybe I was just burned by all of the 8 Teferi decks that we had in Standard for so long.
Oh, well, see, that Teferi, that Teferi is not along. That Teferi's gone.
Yes, Teferi the Time Traveler. Sorry, Time Raveler. A finely removed card. So we see the Torrential Gearhulk getting lapsed, going back into hand, and it's just like a time walk. Carvalho cannot get any additional resources, just has the Gearhulks.
Yeah, and Teferi's emblem's not beatable. Not in this matchup.
Not here.
No. So if Nassif drew a veto, which is just an incredible card here. So yeah, there's just nothing that Marcio's going to be able to do. Nassif is essentially going to probably use that veto on any card that could threaten Teferi.
If a land gets drawn, gets played, and Magma Opus cast, no, it's going to get vetoed.
Yep.
And there's a Torrential Gearhulk, which can get bodied by a 1/1.
Yep, Lightning Helix would do it, except you got the counterspell.
Vetoed. Yeah, and now it's all about protect the Teferi.
Yeah, because once that thing survives, it's going to be over. Yeah, so... Nassif can make a 1/1 here. It's safe to do so with the veto up. Marcio is going to probably use this opportunity to Lightning Helix the Teferi. Or at least on upkeep, since all the counterspells are 2 mana. But, I mean, Nassif could let this resolve. if Nassif thought there was another counterspell, but Veto is a really like if it was like Memory Lapse maybe, but Veto is a little like you're not worried.
No, also Nassif is so far ahead that I think that he could spare a counterspell on this.
Yeah,
and there goes
yeah.
-8 on Teferi.
Yeah,
so now card draw means exile.
Yep. And you play this, it resolves, you remove lands. I mean, I would imagine that the fairies played. Like, there's not that much counters Magic game 1, right? You're better off just jamming spells.
And now Teferi's plus ability reads, draw card, exile a permanent, and untap 2 mana at end of turn.
Yep. And yeah, there's just nothing that Marcio can do here because you can't get ahead of Teferi. The Rest in Peace stops anything completely silly from happening. Yeah, I mean, Nassif's hand is all lands. It doesn't really matter. Marcio's just playing to eat Nassif's clocks for games 2 and 3. That's really why we keep playing here. Is Nassif has to take more game actions. But it's actually fast with these 2 Carcelar Unveils and this Gideon, so it won't actually take as long as you'd think, just because, you know, once you have enough creatures, the job will get done.
And we see the 1/1s getting created, and then the Castle Ardenvale untapped, so another one can be made.
Yep.
And still the a Memory Lapse in hand. There goes this Torrential Gearhulk.
I hope we see a Brainstorm drawn so we can speed this up, and also because it'd be really funny.
So fast. Oh, absolutely. It'd be perfect. And there's Teferi taking out a another land. Gideon's going to try and get some damage in because you have to end the game.
Yeah, but, I mean, well, you want to end the game where your clock's not eaten. You've already ended the game. Yay. Yeah, the fact you draw 2 cards as well per turn. Exile 2 permanents per turn and
get even more removal.
Oh, lovely. You get to make Marcio
redraw. You get to Memory Lapse. Lovely. Yep.
Perfect. Exactly how Marcio had this planned.
All according to Kaikaku. Yes, the plan was don't have any lands, so you die to, well, does this count as land destruction at this point? They did just bring Stone Rain to Historic. Nobody here is playing it.
Nassif is protecting the clock and not going for the perfect win.
Aww.
somebody's like, dude, that card is broken. I'm like, well, I mean, it takes a lot of setup, right? To like cast Teferi, protect, and all that. Like, you know, at that stage, the game is done. But yeah, Teferi is Hero of Dominario remains an extremely powerful Magic card.
Yeah, both players have 4 of them because he's good. He's good and he's scary. And that draw a card, very often a burn or counter spell in this match, and then untap the lands to play that spell adds up to so much advantage across a game.
No, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? If one player runs away with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. Honestly, I'm not too surprised with anything in the sideboard. It's just the sideboards are, I believe, reversed since Nassif's not running Magma Opus. But yeah, you can see like that Mastery plus Magma Opus kind of going away, boarding in more efficient frets, counter spells, planeswalkers. Nassif actually boarding out the Rest in Peace because pre-board it is important against Torrential Gearhulk and Mastery and Magma Opus, but post-board you suspect a lot of those cards come out because of the threat of Rest in Peace and because they're not actually that efficient to resolve. So yeah, you know, take out the Rest in Peace because of how Marcia is going to board out, which is really smart. You board in a way that makes sense against your opponent's post-board configuration, not what you've just seen in the previous game.
Yes, and Nassif getting the win is very important here. If he manages to win this entire round, he is going to stay in the lead for that World Championship invite spot.
I mean, that'd be really good.
Yeah, he doesn't have locked in. There's still another day of this split, but
I mean,
I'd love to
this
see
match
them
is
competing.
between, I believe Nassif went third, right? And Marcio was in lost in the finals to Paolo. So I mean, the players did very well at that World Championship, stayed in the MPL, and still doing really well. They are, some of the best players that have ever played the game for sure.
And we saw a lot of the creature hate taken out because, for the most part, there's very few creatures here. It's just those Gear Hulks and the Kihira on the sideboard, which is actually indicative of not having any creatures here. I really think that Kihira should say you have to have creatures in your deck because it's supposed to be like a tribal companion. Well,
I mean, you have sharks, right? That's a creature. Kind
yeah,
of.
but you don't cast them.
That's true. But by the way, on this match, something super interesting that Nassif did was not play a Triome on turn one. Kind of planned ahead and went, look, I don't need like untapped mana every turn. So next turn, if I don't draw a land, I play my Triome, and if I do, or it's a cheap draw spell, I can just cycle it. So decides not to play the Triome and really planning ahead to cycle the lands.
There is a Narset. Narset, of course, very rude to play against when you have so much potential card draw. Expressive Iteration actually gets around Narset. I believe it puts a card in hand, exiles a card, and then puts one back into the deck. So no draw card triggers there.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, you're kind of in a spot where Nassif does full control to kind of bluff an extra counterspell. Your choice there was, I could leave this dispute up. Next turn, go Gideon of the Trials plus dispute if there's a Teferi, which would have actually worked well. But, you want to start Marcio having the opportunity to get 2 spells here. Plus, on top of getting the 2 spells, just having an Narset passive in play.
And there was not a counterspell drawn there. We see those 2 Teferis in Carvalho's hand. This may be a mirror image of the previous match with the Narset into Teferi just starting up the lock.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? Now Gideon of the Trials is looking really bad because, Nassif could represent a second mystical dispute. Marcio might not run into it, but the problem is Marcio's hand is Teferi, Memory Lapse. So you might as well run one of these. It pays off, and what's the worst that Nassif can do from there? Play the Teferi against a Narset? That's fine. So I understand this expressive iteration. Try to find a counterspell.
And there are no counterspells to be found. And in fact, not really cards you can do much with. You have to let one of these go. And it looks like it's going to be Teferi going to the permanent exile zone.
Yeah, you're hoping for a land and a counterspell that you can put in your hand. That didn't happen. But, I like Nassif doing it. Nassif understands he's behind, and that Gideon of the Trials is just not something that's going to change the scenario. So, take the risk. It's unlikely to pan out, but it's better than staying behind. And you get to look at more cards too.
Ooh, and Narset clearly presenting a choice here and going with Gideon of the Trials. And the first Teferi has landed. Drawing cards and going to let the mana for that Memory Lapse get held up.
Yeah, and this is going to be really hard for Nassif. I mean, Shark Typhoon is really good, but the problem is it only lasts once. This Gideon of the Trials is pretty much a sitting duck. If it hit play, it would just, make Teferi go -3 rather than +1. You also draw in it a bit while it remains a sitting duck. This is really rough for Nassif.
Yeah, Nassif is also just sitting on all these lands.
Yeah. I don't even think Marcio bothers with Memory Lapse here. Maybe you do, but I felt like Teferi's -3 is fine. But I guess if your plan is to just +1 every turn, just use the Memory Lapse here.
I mean, you could even just play the Gideon on your own turn to stop that Gideon from doing any damage.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, there's lots of pathways here. And now with triple planeswalkers, and there is no mass removal for these planeswalkers available.
Yeah, I mean, Marcio has free planeswalkers to Nassif's 0. So
It is a rough spot to be in. And there's also another memory lapse. These lapses have been just showing up and doing work.
It's actually really funny to see memory lapse again. Because this is going to take a while now, and Marcio's going to take control of the game. There's like a shark token that's probably going to happen. So I'll we'll see when that happens. But memory lapse was one of these cards in the old school days of Magic, or the mid school, right? The late '90s, which was critical because you're playing counterspell, but you're also playing memory lapse kind of on top. And it's because of this concept of just buying time. And we haven't seen the card just because it was never modern legal. And, there's way better options in Legacy and in these old formats. So, historic, it's the best counterspell available in a lot of spots. So that's why we see a lot of it. Just 2 mana counter a thing and buy time. Really powerful effect.
We're going to see Teferi utilizing some of this mana, or is it just being floated for nothing?
Just in case, you floated for nothing to pretend you might cast a Magma Opus or something here.
And not going for the shark, just went for a cycle there.
Yeah, that was actually kind of... I guess the shark doesn't get rid of Gideon of the Trials or the Teferi. So, maybe very low. Yeah.
And more... Just more control. This is what happened. This is the blue-white control package. There is the new Prismari command. There is the return of Lightning Helix. But really, at its core, like, we're seeing Carvalho now playing Azorius control. This deck has got a lock. It's got the counter spells. It's got a little bit of just value being generated every turn off these planeswalkers. And it is almost impossible to regain footing against it.
Yeah. So if you're wondering how Nassif wins the game, just picture next game where those planeswalkers on the other side of the battlefield, and you kind of have an answer. You make a large shark. It gets hit by commit. Then you're facing Teferi, Hero of Dominaria at 8, and a memory with a Narset. So that'll probably lock things up relatively quickly. The whole draw 7, exile your opponent's board. Although Goblins Veto can help.
I mean, we also might just see a memory for the memory in order to make Nassif discard, shuffle in, and then draw 1.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to see it because here, second memory lapse, get rid of Teferi. Let's see. Do you actually? Yeah, get rid of Teferi. Concede because we're not going to see it, but yeah, memory plus that emblem. Exile 7 permanents. Nassif has 1 card in hand. Foregone conclusion.
So we're going to take a quick break and then come back with the rest of the game. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Round 5. We're currently in the historic portion of the Strixhaven League weekend split, and we're watching a match between Marcio Carvalho and Gabe Nassif. They're both on different builds of Jeskai Control, and each player has one win.
Yep, and pretty much that win came on the back of Teferi Hero Dominaria resolving, doing +1 a bunch of times, and that's pretty much all you need. So if you're wondering which card matters in this matchup, I have a hint for you. It's incredible. Like the thing is, Teferi uncontested is going to be really difficult to beat. If one of the players gets to untap, especially post board where you have more Dovin's vetoes and you have less Lightning Helix or other effects there's not really anything that cleanly answers Teferi because it goes straight up to 5 loyalty. So it's really about those Dovin's vetoes and the mystical dispute. And the thing is, Narset's also important because not only does it give you card advantage, it forces kind of play. So you saw in that game, it forced the mystical dispute out of Nassif's hand, which meant that Teferi Hero Dominaria is free to resolve. And also the Narset as a passive made it very hard for Nassif to come back into the game.
Over the break, we were talking about the merits of watching this game over watching Pact. And I was saying that, well, Pact is singleton, so there's a little bit more variety, or pseudo-singleton. There's a couple of duplicate copies. But in here, it's all about those Teferis.
Yep, and all 4 copies of them. This is actually okay. This is the spot Nassif has here with Brainstorm and Fabled Passage is kind of fascinating. Okay. So generally you want to keep Brainstorm for as late as possible. That said, there is a really good opportunity to make the hand better here. So yeah, I completely understand doing it. You get to get rid of 2 conditional cards. Definitely, either Prismari Commander Lightning Helix is going away. That's for sure. But then the question is, if one of the others does. Getting of the Trials is
Helix and maybe even the Prismari command.
Yeah, I think it's fine to get rid of both. I was going to say for Getting of the Trials, like, yes, it does run into Dovin's veto and memory lapse on turn 3. If it resolves, though, it's really hard to kind of run away with something like Narset. And, like, at the end of the day, maybe you're running it.
Gab, Nassif, you better make your decision quickly. You have 0 timeouts left.
I mean, we just started the game.
I know, but he needs to build those up. This was relevant in one of the pack matches where if you try to pull off a big fancy turn on like turn 2, you will not have timers built up and you will rope out and pass your turn.
Yeah. That was a fascinating decision by Nassif to put the Teferi on top of it, I feel. Because it's essentially comes down to this, what do I want to do as a control deck? And it's set up, get my mana, and my win condition comes later. And the thing is, with Planeswalkers like Teferi, like the cards are so powerful that we've kind of forgotten about these aspects. Because before, you would focus more on just setting up and the win condition would come. But the thing is, when you're having cards like Teferi Hero of Dominaria taking over the games, I mean, all of a sudden, that a lot of that logic gets thrown out the window. Why? Because I can resolve this card, and if it works out, I win. And a lot of people, do it, and it kind of works out. But Nassif is an old school control player. And that's why you see the Brainstorm shuffle it. Yeah.
And how he likes it, and what he likes is doing the old fetch land shuffle after a Brainstorm.
Yeah. You could fire off the Prismari command here. That doesn't seem great.
Yeah, 2 damage to the face. That'll show him.
Yeah, it's not card advantage, right? It's card. Like, you're always down a card if you're not killing something, because the kind of careful study, Faithless Looting, draw 2 discard 2 mode is in card advantage, right? So at that point, and the treasure token's not worth a card. A shock might be, and destroying an artifact certainly is, but yeah.
And an expressive iteration. I don't really think this is a contender for a card to be countered, but it does mean that your opponent is digging through their deck. Oh. But maybe Just that knowledge of the dig is enough to get Carvalho to counter.
Dispute is so important in this matchup. I'd be surprised to see it used up here.
There was a thought. We saw it.
Yeah. It's also that like all these conditional counter spells, like Mystical Disputes, Spell Pierce for those who remember those. If you're letting, like, normally you don't want to necessarily counter the card draw, but if you believe like the way the match is going to play out, that you won't have access to it down the line, like you might want to do it for card draw, because that card draw might get lands and invalidate your Mystical Dispute down the line.
And so now we see the Brainstorm in hand with the Fabled Passage on Carvalho's side of the battlefield. And there is the potential to play a Teferi here, but it's almost guaranteed that it would be countered. So Nassif is just going to pass the turn and wait for his opponent's actions.
Yeah, and you don't want to play your Teferi and your opponent resolve one.
Oh, no.
That sounds horrible.
The dangers of seeing 5 mana under your opponent's control.
Yep. Brainstorm's pretty powerful because of that Fabled Passage. And Memory Lapse has limited utility. It's not bad, but this is a good spot for it because you're making your opponent have to do it again. Plus, Marcio would do no other action, and you have Dovin's Veto in case there's something like Teferi plus Mystical Dispute. You would have to burn your veto, though. If Marcio went for Teferi, you could not Memory Lapse it. You'd have to veto it, but you're okay trading that resource 1-for-1.
Getting rid of a Teferi temporarily is not like those Gear Hulks in Game 1. You want to get rid of that thing forever. You want it in the graveyard, or better yet, exiled.
Yeah, games where Memory Lapse gets to like the games where you're slightly ahead, Memory Lapse is really disgusting in, because you're compounding your advantage. Like Memory Lapse in Planeswalkers is also an insane synergy, because when you have Planeswalkers in play, all you want to do is buy time. Nothing else matters, right? You just want to activate them more and get more advantage. So the synergy between Memory Lapse, Teferi Hero of Dominaria, and even Narset, Parter Veils is really powerful. I will say Castle Ardenvale, really nice here. Wow. Oh, wow.
Oh, we're going to see the treasure trade here. So Nassif is making a treasure and breaking a treasure.
Like, how important is mana?
I think he's trying to cut Carvalho off from that 5th mana. Or I guess it would be a 6th mana because of the Ardenvale that's going to come down next turn. But, oh, what a move.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, honestly. This whole match like is more like on a macro scale. Like, it seems like nothing happens, and yeah, to be fair, it's, you know, most of the game is taking time because it doesn't seem like anything's happening. But it's really all about the setup, because once you complete that setup, you just take over the game straight up.
Now this seems like a lapsable target. That Gideon of the Trials really doesn't need to be vetoed. He's not going to do all that much on the turn he comes down.
Yeah, and if Marcio fights over this with a dispute or a Memory Lapse or a veto, next turn you get to resolve Teferi Hero of Dominaria, and the reason we see Prismari Command, -3 with it and keep 2 mana up. So, you know, Nassif probably going to play the Teferi Hero of Dominaria here. It's just really tempting. You could play the Gideon, and we just see Gideon's plus until the end of time.
Yeah, stop that damage.
But I think the payoff with Teferi is so high here. The problem, though, is if you go Teferi -3, it just dies to Prismari Command or Lightning Helix, cards that are still in the decks.
But if you don't protect them, if you don't -3 and get rid of that Gideon, what's going to happen is he's going to get hit for 4 damage.
That's true. And then the problem is you have to deal with the Gideon, but without your Teferi's -3. That said, you do get to draw a card, and you have access to both Memory Lapse and Dovin's Veto. So the Teferi is more protected as long as you can get that Gideon of the Trials down. So it's actually pretty close. Plussing here seems better to me. But it's not that easy a decision, because it's only better because of that Lightning Helix. Without Prismari Command or Lightning Helix, minus scene would be better because now you're going to have to burn a memory lapse maybe on a lightning helix. You could do a veto if you're really like a veto. If you're trading a lightning helix for a veto, that's good. Except of course there's a Teferi in play.
Well, Carvalho is still on 5 mana, so he doesn't have that many different moves he can make all at once. Well, there's a 6th land. That does open things up a little bit more. And it looks like we're seeing consideration for the Gideon.
Yeah.
I think Carvalho knows he can't just try to play the Teferi to untap the mana here.
Oh, yeah. No, if you play Teferi, you just run into any counter magic.
And
It'd be a good move if
mana,
you have
yeah, that's things aren't going to resolve.
Right, and on top of that, Nassif like clearly created the treasure. Like, look at that decision to swap the treasure around. Like, look how it's paying off.
That was mana advantage at work.
Yeah. I would believe Nassif lets this resolve because you have a Gideon in your hand and you have a Teferi that's active. So this Gideon's not doing anything. Plus, there's one coming up. I could see a counterspell here. I'm not the biggest fan of it because of that Gideon of the Trials. Without the Gideon of the Trials,
the Gideon of the Trials, they could just plus at each other. They're just gonna sit there and like look at each other like, "Hey, can you do any damage? No. How about you? Nah. And can you do damage? No. Can you win the game? No. I also can't win the game. But can you do damage? No, I can't win. I can't win, and I can't deal damage."
Yep. Plus, Dovin's Veto gets you either way, whether you know because. If you play, if Marcio has Dovin's Veto, Marcio can counter Gideon, but then you can make a token. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Nassif is just trying to get this Teferi Hero of Dominaria to go the distance. And if you counter Gideon, you can't do that. So yeah, this is a good spot. You have to get rid of the cards. That's why Veto's getting used up here. You don't want to run into Dispute. You're going to have to get rid of it if your plan's Teferi.
No, I've been told that my impression of Gideon isn't good enough. I'm sorry, he's a big buff man. He speaks much more down here.
Yes. Oh my goodness, Narset.
Hey, Narset. Hey, you want to lock this game out and make shark cycling a thing of the past?
I mean, yeah, you have Gideon plus Narset and 2 lands and tapping, so you get access to Lapse and Dispute.
Ooh, disgusting. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Nassif just considering Mystical Dispute here. So you start with Narset, which makes sense to me. Since the only 1 mana counter in the whole deck is Dispute. And, you know, it's not going to hit a Gideon. That said, Nassif probably doesn't pay the Dispute if there is one. So we might see Gideon Narset, or even not Narset at all, because of that opportunity to make a 1/1 token with Dispute mana up. Nassif also figures, there's maybe going to be Prismari Command, but very unlikely to be another Lightning Helix here.
Oh, there is just a Memory Lapse. And we also have the Castle Arnvale mana up there, and the Gentleman's Agreement between the 2 Gideon of the Trials. I will not attack you, and you will not attack me.
Yep.
Actually, I think it's totally worth attacking in any way. It's a power move. It says, I have a tapped Planeswalker now.
Yeah, but then you stop the Gentleman's Agreement, right?
I know, but it's not as fun.
I understand. It's just a stalemate. Ooh.
That's a way to get some damage in at Gideon. Oh, even more damage in at Gideon. There's 5 damage there between the Prismari Command and the Lightning Helix, if that's what it gets directed at.
Yeah, I doubt it, just because you can see that other Gideon from Teferi's minus earlier, and we get to attacking with these tokens, right? Gideon will eventually die.
Eventually. Yeah, it happened in War at a Spark, I remember.
Oh, yeah. In the end, right?
In the end, that trailer was amazing.
Yeah. You were there live too, right? Yeah, that was.
I was, insane. But I wasn't in that room. I did not get to shed my tears with the audience of many. I was looking at my phone at the feed from all of 100 feet away.
Yeah. Someone, Chad is going like spoilers. I'm like, look, it's been a while. You should have read the Magic story like Amy did, because you do book readings. But I'm not talking so much about the game here because we're getting to the point where Nassif is locking it up, and essentially it's going to come down to the Shark Typhoon getting there because it's a 4/4. But the game will open up soon if it wasn't for this commit. Yeah. Actually, this might be the okay. So if you make a 4/4 shark and draw a land, you get to go to Fairy plus Memory Lapse back up, and the Thief Shield would be down. But then you have the token. You still have the Teferi in play. It's not looking bad for the Thief no matter what happens here, really.
Yeah, there are so many different lines that deal with the shark.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah, for
protecting
sure.
the Teferi, that's important. And while your opponent's tapped out, you can do that commit, or you can always save it until the next turn.
I mean commit yeah, and wow, okay.
Oh. Wait, but maybe we're going to see the double burn spell here.
Oh no! Oh, this is gross. The reason we're seeing the double burn spell is because Marcio cycled a card.
Which means he's already drawn a card this turn, and now Narsit's passive is going to say, "Oh, discard 2."
Oh, that is gross.
So,
that is gross.
The dispute is still held up.
Yep.
Oh, are you sure you want to target your opponent with Prismari Command? Why, yes. I'd love to give them a selection of 0 cards and then they have to discard 2. It's secretly mind rot.
Yeah, and the only card that in Marcel's whole deck that could be drawn there was a Mystical Dispute, because you'd have Teferi plus Dispute. But yeah, Teferi. I mean, Marcel's gonna consider it. Probably go like I probably have to play this Teferi. I can't wait. And yeah, I mean, you could make an Ardenvale token. I just don't think that's going anywhere. But yeah, that was incredible. Just, also, yeah, and we that like the. I mean, I was wondering like why were you using 2 spells to kill the shark rather than commit? Also using more. Oh, okay, that's why. That's why. Nassif gets to play a modified version of Blightning. That's why we get to do this.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
So far, it looks like Nassif with his triple planeswalkers. This seems to be how these games go, by the way. One player has 3 planeswalkers and is just a chuckling giddily as they sweep away the game. Well, actually, neither of the players seem to be doing much chuckling. They're very focused. I'll do the chuckling for them.
Yeah, and this is Teferi running away with the game. Yeah, it's.
Oh,
sure.
And look, a backup Teferi.
Just in case.
Just in case. I mean, he might have to go away just because there's a couple counter spells in hand.
Yeah, you even get to cast an iteration. Keep going for the deck, untap the lands with the Teferi. So, yeah, your Narsit's passive is there. You don't. You get to play a land. Probably pay 2 life. You don't care about that.
Pay 2 life because it gives you a little bit more you can do.
I'm not even sure it literally changes anything, but it doesn't matter. I
don't think it changes anything because he has the ability to deal with 2 cards, and that's the most that Carvalho is going to have in hand because Narsit's going to be stopping anything else.
Yep. You make a token with Ardenvale, and this Gideon will go down, and then this Teferi will eventually ultimate. Oh,
hey,
Fry. Oh. Yeah, that card, Fry, is always bittersweet for me, right? Because I
just wish it did a little bit more, but it does kill the planeswalkers that I want dead the most.
Well, yeah, there was a joke with Fry that was based on a planeswalker it specifically didn't kill. But it's okay. It's okay.
Those pesky high loyalty planeswalkers.
Yeah, I wonder which one. But Fry is actually really nice technology. That's a really good addition by Nassif because it kills Teferi no matter what. So having a copy of that card is, I think, really smart, especially for this matchup. So yeah, in the Jeskai Control mirrors, Fry is excellent. Oh, somebody said it's not okay, it's Oko. That's a great one.
No, we're allowed to talk about Oko all we want. I've heard he's actually going to be returning to Magic Arena for a special event soon, along with some of our other favorite band cards.
Yeah. Is one of them called Teferi?
I believe there's going to be a modified version of Oko and Teferi in that event, and I'm greatly looking forward to hearing their voice lines again.
Oh yeah, the voice lines. Yeah, yeah. You're right. The other cards are not going to have voice lines, which is a bit unfortunate.
Oh, I know. Fires of Invention had the best voice lines of them all, called "Sitting There" and being an enchantment.
Fires of Invention was usually with the Luca voice line, and yeah. And by the way, sorry for people who are watching this game trying to go like, well, what can happen here? What are lines? And me basically telling you, as long as Nassif doesn't disconnect or have anything of that ilk, you'll eventually get there. Teferi's at 6. There's nothing in Marcio's deck that is going to get through this wall of memory lapses. And it's just a matter of time before Nassif can kind of take over the game, especially because Castle Ardenvale, Marcio gets to do 1 token, Nassif gets to do up to 2 a turn, plus have the counter magic up.
We can see a consideration for Fry, maybe digging a little deeper in the deck with this expressive iteration. Ooh, I would love to see a hard cast Shark Typhoon.
Sure, why not? I don't think we'll see it, but sure, why not?
It would be so nice. It would be so nice.
Yeah. This is the point.
Cast the shark. Cast the shark.
Nassif is not even trying to use cards to the greatest possible efficiency. It's more like at this point, it's just locking the game up.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows that hard casting the shark is the best thing you can do. Right here, be like, oh, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be casting non-creature spells. What happens whenever I do that? Flying shark. It's time to land the Sharknado. Please let it happen. It might not be the optimal play, but you've got such a good advantage.
It's really far from the optimal play, right? When your opponent's playing Dovin's Veto. Like, it's not even close. But, it will help to end this game, surely. The only thing, by the way, that Nassif is doing, from a caution perspective, that some people might have spotted is Magma Opus is in Marcio Carvalho's deck, so Nassif is just not tapping out at any point because that's like one of the very few cards that could get Marcio ahead. Nassif has 6 minutes. I believe that'll be more than sufficient to close this one out.
Yes, especially now that Gideon can start doing damage to face rather than these 1/1s just trading damage.
Yeah. Yeah, Nassif is smiling. It's just like this pace of play is a little different.
Oh. I saw the very brief spark of joy of, oh, but what if he hard cast the Sharknado?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And that is victory. All it takes is a giant flying shark for Gabe Nassif to secure the win in round 5. And that means, by the way, that Nassif is going to be leading in points for the entire weekend so far. Like, he is at the top, and somebody's going to need to dethrone them if they want to get that World Championship invite.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is you're giving Nassif control mirrors as well. It's making it harder to dethrone Nassif in this process. But at least you're in pod play, right? So the idea is that you're facing other people on similar-ish records. So the people that Nassif needs to beat or keep ahead of are probably going to be people playing against Nassif. So, at least that way, Nassif playing, for that World Championship seat against people who are also in the hunt for that.
Yeah, we've got these people that are all in the top runnings. And we're going to be going to another match from round 5 soon, but we're going to be taking a quick break first. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Round 5. We're here watching some historic gameplay from the Strixhaven split in the League weekend, and it looks like we're about to watch Mengucci, versus Juza. This is going to be a fantastic match because these are two of the best players and two of my favorite players to watch.
Yeah. Plus Mengucci, true to form, running the pig. Ivor Doom Foretold or Yasharn Implacable Earth. Always true to form. Of course, there's only 2 copies, but it's fine. Bant Midrange, Gross Spiral, Nissa, Who Shakes the World. If you've watched competitive Magic in the last 2.5 years, you probably know what's up.
You probably had your world shaked by Nissa at least once or twice. Yasharn not doing quite as much in this meta, seeing as there are fewer things being sacrificed as there were just a couple months ago. But it's still a strong game plan to ramp to good Planeswalker.
Right. Now, the problem is your clock is not very fast, and you have 4 memory lapses. And you're facing the Pact combo. There is something about this list that didn't seem to pop up. There are 4 copies of Abundant Harvest in Mengucci's deck and 2 Brainstorms, and I find it interesting that there's 4 Harvest and 2 Brainstorm. Brainstorm being like a card that basically dominates Legacy ubiquitously, but you still take Abundant Harvest, a card from Strixhaven, which is technically historic and Legacy Plus only legal because it's coming in Modern Horizons too. But a lot of people have started realizing how powerful it is. That said, looking at Martin Juza, not really worried about much that isn't memory lapse in the pre-board game. If you haven't seen this deck before, there's a bunch of ways to win, but they all revolve around Fasta's Oracle and having a relatively empty library. That's why you see all these cards being one-ofs. The lands are also one-ofs, because with Tainted Pact, that gives you the ability to exile most, if not all, of your library, which also makes it an extremely good tutor.
This deck is a pseudo-singleton deck, which means that it's trying to land a combo, but it's got all sorts of other good stuff, mostly protecting that combo in the deck. It's a variety of discard spells, counter spells, and kill spells, all trying to protect the Thassa's Oracle winning the game off of Tainted Pact, exiling the library.
Right. And as a result, you're seeing some constructed all-stars like Shimmer of Possibility in the deck. Anticipate, which generally doesn't fit in the decks, well, it's here because you can only run one of these Omen of the Seas. And the thing is, it does make it a little hard to play against these decks sometimes because you basically have to revolve around the combo because nothing else matters. And how are you going to know what other cards to play around? If you can read your opponent's hand and they're playing this, you are an incredible Magic player. Maybe even beyond the level in this field.
Yeah, I love that we've got 2 players here. One of them has brought a really nice Bant deck. It's got a mix of things, early ramp. It's got these beater lands coming from this, and it's playing up against a CEDH deck because it's all these lovely one-ofs. One of the most interesting things are the mana bases in these decks, and you'll see it when we get into the game, that you have lands that come in tapped, lands that are very, 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 let's say, useful in situations that you almost never come up to, but they're blue and they're black and they let you cast your spells, and that's what matters.
Yeah, my favorite utility land that I saw was Ipnu Rivulet, which can be quite good in these in the pack mirrors sometimes. Since you get to essentially, if your opponent's like trying to go for the at end of turn I'm going to go down to 2 cards plan, then you just go like, okay, I'll just Rivulet you, bye.
Yeah, I'd love to see Juza show his APM here. One of the trickiest parts about playing this deck that you wouldn't run into in paper quite as much is the arena interface limits how many actions you can take in a turn because of the amount of time that it takes. So you are racing against the clock, and sometimes you actually have to preemptively set up your combo and let Tainted Pact exile your deck.
Right. So we'll actually discuss the rope quickly because it is important. Manually, it's not really possible to cast Tainted Pact with 0 ropes and actually get there. Like, it's just not because of the animation. So, and again, this is a historic only combo deck. So it's not like it's actually doing something it's not meant to do. That's actually part of the online format. Now, that said, one of the things with Tainted Pact is when you do cast it, you can... Oh my gosh, this hand is incredible with Oracle and Pact. Yeah.
What are the chances?
Yeah, not high. Yeah, and this is the thing. This could be a turn-free win in some formats without the robe, but it's not because you won't have time. One of the things with Tainted Pact is if you run out the timer, Tainted Pact will automatically decline or until it hits kind of the second copy. So that's fine if you go fast as Oracle and then with the trigger on the stack cast Tainted Pact, because then you don't have to be good at clicking. You can just let it run out and you win.
And there is a second fastest Oracle for a little bit of redundancy built into the deck. And having a Mind Stone here is also quite nice because it means if a blue source happens to get drawn, that's the fastest Oracle Tainted Pact right there.
I mean, the game could literally be over if Martin wins the game next turn if it's an untapped blue source.
It's
not.
Well, it's going to get a blue source, but it will unfortunately have to come in tapped with only 3 total lands there. But we do see the Brainstorm and Fabled Passage, unfortunately, bricked, thanks to Narset.
I mean, Martin was like something like 25% to literally win the game on turn 3 there. Just straight up win. No questions asked, nothing. Win. Nothing possible.
Oh, going for the Brainstorm anyway here, saying, whatever, I can discard.
Yeah. Well,
not discard, but shuffle them back into the deck with the Fabled Passage.
Yeah.
All you need are those Tainted Pacts, Oracle, and the Dispute's probably good to hold on to.
A little surprised, honestly, to see that, but maybe with this strong a hand, Martin is literally only looking for a land, right? Because with a land, that's why you see it, right? Martin's doing this because with a land, you get to go Oracle, Pacts, Dispute backup. Turns out, Mengu actually has 2 counter spells. So, look, we went from Martin being like very, very likely, having a good chance to win on turn 3 to now it being, this looks like a disaster because Mengu essentially has 2 counter spells and a bunch of Shark Typhoons, so doesn't have to tap out and essentially gets to put Martin under quite a bit of pressure while having counter magic backup.
Yeah, that negate being visible is such a slam in the face, and the Brainstorm into Narset, I wonder if that was intentional. I wonder if that was a mistake.
No, I think it was intentional. Juza was trying to get an untapped blue source, and with an untapped blue source, you get to go Oracle, Pact, and Dispute. It wouldn't have worked out, but that was the intention. I suspect Martin didn't look like his face wasn't like in pain or what did I do or anything like that. It really looked like Martin was trying to get a card deeper.
There is a very situational land coming in there, the old Bajuka Bog.
All right.
And we are seeing the Mystical Dispute held up here, I believe, in case of a Nissa. Or Teferi. They're both scary.
I mean, not like we can cast anything in our hand.
I mean, if you're not threatening a counterspell, you can always put Luris in hand.
Yeah, I think that's fine here. One of the ways Martin has is if Andrea tries to go for a Nissa and you get that, then Andrea doesn't have access to counterspell mana. But with these Shark Typhoons, Andrea doesn't have to tap out for a Nissa, and now we got Negate, Memory Lapse, a free Shark, a 2/2 Shark, and a Dispute. And yeah, Andrea's going to be able to, I think, take this game down relatively easily as a result.
Yes, this is the fury of the Sharks. There is Gideon of the Trials. Just another way to protect yourself from the combo, because if your opponent cannot win the game, then their combo just doesn't work.
Yeah, you get to 0 and make an emblem. So instead of winning the game, they don't. Yeah. And I mean, this game could have been over on turn 3 had Juza just had the untapped blue source with that hand. It's almost hilarious, right? It's like as a result of Andrea getting to untap with the Narset and having all the counter magic up, plus the Shark Typhoons, it's done deal almost. But as a result of Martin not having that, the game kind of ended the other way because
and we're just seeing the Tainted Pact anyway. Just gonna dig through the deck. Because it is pseudo singleton, Juza does have the choice between any single card in his deck.
Yeah, within time.
Oh, and there's a cat butt. Oh, I was just looking over at Yuza's hand. There was a cat there.
I mean, Eliminate's actually not bad. It gets rid of the Gideon.
Yeah, it can kill a 3-mana Planeswalker. And Yuza does have a few turns to survive here, but with this many counter spells in Mengucci's hand, it seems unlikely to be able to come back.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, Martin has free mana up. Andrea was ready to fire back, but then you see the Mind Stone, so nope. Yeah. But now we got... here's the problem, right? You played in a way where Nissa, who shakes the world, was going to be a losing play. That is no longer the case, especially with a number of breeding pools untapped.
2 mana lands. Anything that's a forest generates an extra green mana with this Nissa in play, which means that untapping that Temple Garden there leaves 6 mana up.
Yep. Yeah.
It also gives a potential just attack into this Lurrus with this Vigilant land. What are you going to do? Trade?
I mean, Mengu's threatening lethal relatively quickly. And, I mean, Martin could, draw a card of Mind Stone, replay Lurrus, but I don't think there's a time to do that. You're facing 5 in the air and then 6 on the ground.
Oh. Is it time to tutor from the deck? From the sideboard?
I mean...
And I saw a question about why Mengucci didn't attack in with the 2/2 Shark. It's the same reason he didn't attack in with the 3/3 land. He's not interested in trading the 3/3 with that Lurrus and would rather trade the 2/2 Shark.
Yep, sure. Yeah, it gets the other Tainted Pact, but now you have 2 cards, and I don't know if the Narset's even that important. Oh, yeah. So sorry. Yeah, Mind Stone plus Lurrus doesn't work as well because of the Narset. But yeah, it's I don't think attacking Narset was going to do much. I think what's going to happen is Martin has the combo in hand. Mengucci's going to threaten lethal or close to lethal this turn. Martin's going to be forced to just go for it, and then Mengucci has Mystical Dispute, Memory Lapse.
There's just so many counter spells available and so much mana for Mengucci.
Yeah.
And look, you know what? Let's just use up some of that mana. Throw Kahira in hand. Why not?
I mean, that way you get to make Lurrus chump block, which is a plus.
Yeah, these elementals get +1/+1. Kahira buffs all of the key creature types that were from Ikoria. So you had I believe it was blue, elementals, red dinosaurs, green beasts.
Yeah.
You also had cats and nightmares. Totally, definitely.
So
I remember all the apexes lined up with those. So we're seeing that Mind Stone here as a desperation. Oh, I hope there's something here. Hey, there's that Augur of Bolus. That was in the opening hand.
I mean, you can maybe get a duress from this. But Martin's hoping there's exactly 1 counterspell in Andrea's hand.
There are 3.
Oh, well. That's a shame. Right, you got Pact and Negation. for the Pact theme deck. But yeah, at this point, you go for Fastest Oracle. You wait until it resolves, because then you cast a Tainted Pact. But the dispute, you have to counter, I believe. Yeah, because you only have 3 mana, so you can't pay for Oracle and play Pact. So you can let the Pact resolve, or you can recounter the Fastest Oracle, and that's going to do it. Because, yeah, Martin can pay. That's the problem, is then you don't play the Tainted Pact, and Mengucci has way more than enough damage here.
Yeah, the paying the 3 means that you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and choose to keep one on top and put 1 or 2. It's just you look at one, maybe you could keep it on top. That's it. That's all it does. That's its Oracle, though it is a win con. Really doesn't do all that much otherwise.
Yeah. It does not. It does not.
She's a 1/3. And you know what a 1/3 does against 4/4s? Dies.
Oh, yeah. It does not match well.
Oh, and it looks like, I think Martin might be going for the, you know what? I want to pay the 3. I want to see what the top cards in my deck were. Would they have helped me at all?
They would not. And I mean, that's just a consequence of, Martin's going to, I think if Martin relooks at this game, fundamentally it was, look, you needed the source to win on turn 3, and after that, Mengucci just had an ironclad hand you couldn't beat. Oh, yeah, this happens. Sometimes it's difficult to come back into what's going on. But yeah, there is a way to go back. You just have to unclick the view battlefield.
There we go. So you get locked into the future site.
Yes. Yeah, this looks good enough for lethal damage.
And swing it in with the kitty cat, the sharks, and the lands for lethal. And the win goes to Andrea Mengucci, cinching that round 5 victory against Martin Juza.
Yep. And, played